everybody to our panel discussion regarding the future of cyber insurance. My name is Casey Jennings. So I'm the Strategic Alliance Executive over here at Tevora, and I'll be the MC for this fireside style chat. So our 5 amazing panelists will be discussing topics regarding how cyber insurance can be incentivized by proactive risk management and incident response planning, and then how incident response can also help insurers reduce losses and improve the underwriting process. So first off, I want to thank everyone that's joining this webinar, as well as those who are able to catch the downloaded version that we'll send out here in the upcoming days. And then of course, I want to thank love to thank my panelists for joining as well. So with that, what I'll do to smooth the process a little bit easier, I'll do the introductions for everybody. So first off, we have Linda Comerford, who is the AVP of Incident Response at AmTrust. We then have Peter Hedberg, who's the Vice President of Cyber Underwriting at Corvus Insurance, who is taking the place of Monique Ferrari, who unfortunately had to bow out real quickly. So thank you so much, Peter. And then next we have Jason Schutt, who's the SE Director at Silverfort. And then we have Yanesi Nunez, who's the CISO over at Jack Henry. And then last but certainly not least, we have Matt Mosley, who's the Director of Incident Response over at Tevora. So what I have here is a series of questions where all the panelists, I'm going to start off with one, but then all the panelists will have the ability to add their insights. And, hopefully time permitted, we can also have some Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. So let's go ahead and get started with question 1. And Peter, if you don't mind, I want to put you on the hot seat and kick it off with you with question 1. So let's get the ball rolling. So when looking at cyber insurance policies compared to other traditional policies, what unique challenges do insurers face when underwriting for cyber risks?
So that's a phenomenal question. It's timely because there is a active discussion right now among senior underwriting leadership within the cyberspace about whether cyber is insurable or not. And my opinion, obviously, is it's very insurable. I think it's important to note that it's not a product like any other insurance product. So you look at property, and I can tell you that having a condo on the coast of Florida, within a 3 to 5 year span is going to get blown away by a hurricane and what it's going to cost. And I've got a lot of historical data behind that. Similarly with auto, I can tell you that insuring, people under the age of 25 in particular states is terrible and all that. We're building a lot of data in cyber right now, and we, along with the InsurTech community, have been able to build a lot of instructive models and actuaries coming along nicely. The one element that is making it very different for us versus a lot of other insurance lines though right now is we have an adversary that is always evolving and changing. So instead of just a hurricane getting stronger, we don't, it's like owning a condo, using that analogy, it's like owning a condo in all 50 states and all different 50 weather patterns and all variety of perils and that sort of thing. So it is challenging because the focus has to be both external and internal. I've got to focus on internal controls, but then I got to worry about things that are happening outside of my control within the dark web and the other community. So I don't know, Linda, just on the insurance side, you probably see some of that too, but that's what I'm keeping me up at night.
100%, Peter. When it comes to cyber, it's very hard to say this is exactly what's going to happen in the future, right? We know that weather's changing. Certain areas are seeing, harsher weather. But when it comes to the unknown of ransomware or email compromise, it can be at varying levels based on the business, based on what threat is next to come from the threat actors, right? So like Matt and his team, they see on a regular, all right, we have XYZ ransomware group. Well, in 6 months, that can drastically change. Or maybe OFAC, knocks down one group and says, hey, we can't send any sort of payments to them. So we're like, all right, they're no longer in the game. Who else is going to take their place? Because one thing we have seen is they're very adaptive. Whenever one threat comes forward, we're going to see another if one is gone, right? Because they're just going to keep changing, growing, and that's part of the challenge of cyber. We can't always know what's going to happen, and we have to kind of always be on our toes. And I think that's a little different in insurance, whereas the past insurance, like you're saying, was based on old facts and what was known and experience. We don't really have that, and it would be impossible to perfectly predict that. We can only guesstimate. And then even there's a 0-day event that could totally blow us out of the water, right? So Microsoft Exchange Server Vulnerability 2021, we weren't really expecting that. And we were all very, very, very busy with all the activity that happened because it was a lot easier for threat actors to get in based on that vulnerability. So yeah, I agree. I think it's very hard to predict. And one thing I think we learn on the claims side is it's really important to work with your insureds, hold their hand when something does hit that they're not sure of, and always submit a claim, even if you don't know if it's going to hit or not, because let's take a look at it with you. Maybe we have experience that the insured might not have, because that's kind of what your insurance team is there for. You know, Peter's helping sell policies that the claims team is then there to help hold your hand through. So I personally would rather you call us and we're able to point you in the right direction or give you some guidance than be floundering, right? Because we'll call in the troops. We'll call in Matt and his team and say, hey, we've got these wonderful, talented people that are going to be able to help you through this. And that's why you buy cyber.
Oh, that makes perfect sense, Linda. Peter, I liked your analogy, being someone who lived in a condo in South Florida during hurricane season. That touches home for me a little bit. Before I go to the next question, Yanesi, Matt, or Jason, would you guys like to chime in? If not, I can go right to the next question.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Linda was saying. You know, just recently this week, there was news articles comes out that the ransomware group Babook, they dissolved, I think, sometime last year, but we're just getting reports that 9 other groups have spun up using their software that's available. They've reworked it, revitalized the work that group had already been doing, and now they're making it faster, stronger, harder. so yeah, it's just constantly evolving. Just to add to what Linda was saying.
All I can say is I totally agree with everything that's being stated here. So on the Silverfort side, you know, focusing on identity, we see this constant evolution of threats and changing the positions and the directions and the targets, right? And we see a lot of the centering around identities and humans and well, essentially the new perimeter, right? Which is all of us, all people.
Sure, no, absolutely. And then, Linda, I think what you were saying segues perfectly into the next question, which is why I'm going to call on you first. So what are some of the biggest challenges facing the cyber insurance industry as a whole today, and how are companies addressing these challenges?
I think there are several that first come to mind. One is consistency in terminology, right? Because all the policies could have different terms that get very confusing when you're hunting for insurance. You know, maybe they call it misdirected funds, maybe they call it something completely different. Privacy breach or potential breach or breach data, what have you. Every single company for insurance has a different name that they come up with. And so I think that lends for a lot of confusion as to what is even covered, what is cyber insurance for. And I think that sitting down with someone who's familiar with that can be really helpful for a company to break down, what am I getting insurance for? What am I potentially covered for? You know, what are the types of scenarios that I'm looking to save money on if I have an incident, right? Your ransomwares, your data breach, mishandling of information accidentally, right? Those sorts of things happen all the time. And that's why cyber is so important. You know, misdirecting funds happens on the regular. So I think that is one big challenge, is consistency of terms. And the other big challenge that comes to top of mind is how it's always evolving, right? So we already talked a little bit about that, but I think that is a challenge of how do we keep including new coverages to make sure that we are covering what is needed as the market changes.
Yeah, I'll hop in and add just there's a challenge in distributing this product because the buyer is not the buyer that should be buying the product at an organization. And Yanezi, I'd love if you chimed in after I talked about this. You have a community of CISOs who are given a budget, and the budget is often not enough, okay? IT centers are cost centers. They don't generate revenue, but they ensure that you'll be in business. And one of the challenges of being a CISO is you're kind of the goalie of the business, right? You're never going to win a game, but you'll definitely lose a game, right? Or be the reason for the loss of the game. And so I think one of the problems that we have is the CFO looks at the cost of this insurance, and then they go to their CISO and they say, well, should you just take that premium and put it into the IT? And I often respond with, if you have sprinklered a building, put it on stilts, and done everything to fireproof it, are you not going to buy property insurance anymore? Well, the answer is no. You buy the insurance for an event that you hope doesn't happen, but might happen. But I still think there's some tension there between the buyer, which is typically the CFO in finance, and a CISO. So Nessie, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I mean, I think I got a different perspective from the chair of a CISO, and that's if I think about cyber insurance over the last 10 years, for me, the price of insurance has gone up. So it's a great conversation around changing landscape, changing attack vectors. Bad guys are figuring out new ways of attacking, but by the same token, we're figuring out new ways for defense and being proactive about those defenses. So I feel that most organizations are getting better at their cybersecurity, but that's not reflected, again, from the perspective of the CISO in the cost of insurance, right? So if I sit down and talk to my CISO friends, they'll tell you that they're seeing their premiums increase by 100% over the last couple of years, and some higher. So on average, about 100% for the same coverage. So I feel that there's a problem in how insurance is brokered today, cyber insurance specifically, and I don't feel like the final book is written in this space. So, I'll give you an example. If you ask CISOs today, is my cyber insurance for next year going to be less for the same coverage? The answer is probably no. And myself included, I feel that there's a lot of work to be done in that space. I don't have the answers, obviously not being an insurance professional, of how we get out of this, but I would say over the last 5 years, we've seen a steep increase in the cost of cyber insurance. Understanding that, again, threat landscape emerges. Once the bad guys figured out about 3-4 years ago that cyber insurance companies were going to pay for this stuff, they monetized ransomware, right? That's the destructive malware. When ransomware first was thought of through the first event in the Bank of Bangladesh, that was the first big ransomware event. It was a figment of our imagination, scenario-based testing that could happen, right? Everyone expected destructive malware to come in the guise of the bad guys are going to destroy your data, but no, the bad guys want to hold your data for ransom, and now you pay for that data. So there are multiple approaches. We're seeing data exfiltration. We're seeing coercion. We're seeing executive targeting with ransomware. So multiple different avenues. So I get that it's getting more complex to underwrite in this space, but I don't feel that organizations are given the credit today around what they're doing to have good hygiene, good protection, and proactive defense. So that's my experience, the experience that I'm seeing from my colleagues and peers as they go forward in protecting leveraging cyber insurance. So I hope that helps.
Casey, can I hop in with a little claims intel?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure. I definitely hear what you're saying. When it comes to purchasing in general, a lot of the complaints I hear are cost, and they had gone up since I originally have seen policies, right? I've been in this space probably 8-9 years now, and originally it was less. Then they were realizing how expensive it was to have insurance, and they were adding more coverages. So the more coverages that were added, the greater the risk, the more likely to pay out. And so if you're going to pay out, you have to have money from somewhere to pay out from. And we've definitely seen that ransomware is no joke. As someone who deals with it on a regular, if you're talking about paying a ransom demand, dealing with the data mining, notification costs if that's deemed necessary, plus digital forensics, shoring up the vulnerability and remediating back to where you were prior to the incident, as well as legal counsel to assess if you need to notify, those costs, those are the bare minimum, and they add up so quickly. So on an average for my ransomware claims, we're paying out $200,000, $300,000 to a full $1 million policy, depending on what's going on, where they're at, how big the company is. And those are for smaller businesses. So when we think of ransomware and okay, maybe that policy, because I'm a smaller business, cost me $20,000 or $10,000 or $5,000, but if they hadn't had it, it would have been $1 million out of pocket. And so I think that sometimes that isn't really understood, because a lot of the costs that go into it are not just how do we get back to operational, what's our business interruption loss. There's a lot of loss that goes into an event that people don't see until it hits them. And so I also deal with a lot of programs. A program is a little different. It's more of like an add-on to a policy that they're buying elsewhere. So it has very small limits and a lot less coverage. So it might just be sort of like a bonus tag on for another policy that they're purchasing, like their MedMal policy. And if you only have $100,000, I have seen every single office that had that regret not getting a buy-up for the full $1 million, because no matter how hard we work to keep those costs down, it's very likely they're going to get to 200 to 300K in a ransomware remediation event. So I definitely understand it's hard to see the value in it and what you're paying for, but I see on a regular what pays out and how commonly we pay out and how busy we are. And I definitely know that those who use and turn in their claims when they first happen are getting the utmost out of their policy. And I will say the value of the hand-holding in and of itself is such a value, because someone who's never dealt with ransomware before might not know a lot of the nuances and details that could go into it becoming issues when remediating. And so I think that that kind of sometimes isn't known, right? And then there have been plenty of CISOs who come to me after and like, I told them to get a cyber policy that was bigger, but we didn't because we didn't have the budget. And then I get the CEOs coming to me being like, I regret not listening to our CISO. We should have gotten that bigger policy. What were we thinking? And I'm like, well, let's look to the future. How do we get back to normal from this? And then what you do in the future, you have a little bit more to pull from having experienced it. So I think sometimes once people have had an incident that's paid out, they can see the value, and that isn't always visible to people who aren't seeing it on the regular, right? So like Peter and I see it pretty regularly and could probably speak a little bit more to where we're seeing costs going and how, even though it could seem expensive, in the end, it ends up being worth it.
Yeah, and I'll add, and I don't want to focus too much on it, but Yanezi brings up a really good point, and it needs to discuss, because I think especially people in the audience here are having these discussions within their companies right now. Insurance is not a instantly priced product. It's a reactively priced product. And we've had very bad loss years in 19, 20, and 21. 22, we saw some relief on the claims side, and now the premiums hopefully are reaching a level of stabilization and better underwriting. But there's something else that happened, and as he brought it up, which is we've seen a very gradual but market steady increase in the controls that companies have been implementing. Their security posture, their security hygiene, the security culture have all been increasing. Now, what we need to see is whether that's going to translate to a consistent drop in claims. So what we've seen so far in 2022 for a lot of companies was ransomware went down. Q1 and Q2 this year, it has skyrocketed again. What we're going to find out, and here's what everybody's holding their breath on in the insurance industry, is whether all of these controls we've been asking for, multi-factor authentication, endpoint detection, better backups, immutable, protected with MFA, et cetera, if that's actually going to work. So now we're going to find out if the ship sails. And so I feel a lot of pain that the CISOs are having, and I'm trying to sympathize as best I can, but we need a little more time to figure out whether this exchange between the insurance and the insurance buyers is going to pay out. I think it will, based on what I'm seeing in my company, but I can't speak for all companies. And all insurance companies have a different risk appetite, and they have a different set of guidelines on what they're willing to accept. So anyway, there's a lot of diversity and thought of that, but very much appreciate you sharing your experience.
But I think it's a great discussion, because I think that part of this journey, right, from the insurer to the companies to the attackers, I see this almost like a nice little triangle where I think we're all getting better. That the attackers included, right? So we get insurance coverage, we get better protection. Attackers figure out new ways of protecting our environment. And I think it goes back to kind of the precept around risk management, which is to say, we need to make sure that we're dealing with this risk appropriately. We need to look at cyber insurance as a way for dealing with that risk should the unthinkable happen. So I think it's the balance that we're getting to right now. And as I mentioned, right, the attackers are going to continue to evolve, right? We're going to continue to do better in our controls. Insurance, I feel like right now that is in a route that everyone's increasing, right? So we're getting better, they're getting better, insurance is getting more expensive. So I don't, right now, to your point, Peter, the data's in, so we're constantly reviewing that information. So as an industry, there has to be that acknowledgement for organizations, for insurers, that the cost is definitely going up. It doesn't look like the attackers are going to stop anytime soon. But how do we strike that balance? And as a question for you folks that do this day in and day out, but how much information is required? How many more years until we kind of get to a steady state? Or is the answer that there is no steady state because things are moving so rapidly? But I kind of want to get your take on that, because that's sort of what we're waiting with bated breath, is at which point does this equation, this process become more streamlined so you can predict what's happening? Today, it's really hard for us to predict where we're headed.
Yeah, so cyber as a product, and sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to cut you off. Cyber as a product hasn't reached what we've considered a full maturity of total addressable market yet. Some estimates say that we're collecting 40% of all available premium for the risk that we're starting to take on. There was this initial thought that cyber insurance was going to be this specialty product that was going to hang off toward the side, and it was never going to be as important as casualty or property will. It's now starting to turn into just as important as those two major components. So my guess is when the market reaches its total addressable value, which I think we've got about maybe 2 to 4 years to finally build that out, then we're going to start seeing a lot more stabilization, because then actuary is going to have a complete picture of what all insured businesses in the United States look like and what those losses look like.
Well, we're still missing out of the book, right? Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Absolutely. I was just going to say, as a data-driven company, which Silverfort is inside and out, we're seeing the trends. And Peter, you brought up MFA, right? So we know data speaks for itself. Increasing your MFA footprint and extending it to places where it's previously not able to extend to reduces the likelihood of attack, which should hopefully in turn reduce the insurance premiums, right? So if you have 100 accounts and they're all protected with MFA, no matter what they do and how they access resources on your network, then you have I've seen statistics anywhere from 99% higher, less likelihood of being breached. So it's following the data, it's following the trends, right, which are somewhat unpredictable, but we definitely know that we're in the era of the identity, right, which is you and I, the human, being attacked. And that's where a lot of focus needs to get put into place and adding additional controls such as MFA and other things as well.
I completely agree with Jason. I think identifying low-hanging fruit and then making sure that we're addressing that low-hanging fruit, what makes you such an easy target, is essential. That MFA on your email and pretty much anything else, having a VPN, making sure that you're whitelisting and keeping things from being outward facing, right? So many things. Matt, I'm sure you can name a million.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But back to your point, everything's getting better. And I think as an industry, all of us collaboratively are getting better. Companies like Silverfort are coming out and, changing the way we do security with multi-factor authentication, right? Just like Jason said, putting MFA in places that we couldn't previously do that. So those are some of the advantages that we have over some of the attackers now. And hopefully we can get to that spot where Peter was talking about 2 to 4 years from now, where everything kind of balances out. And we have a good checklist of things we need to do, right? Those 12 ideal things, multi-factor, VPN, et cetera, email protection. So.
No, that's perfect, guys. I'm going to skip one of the questions because I think another one segues perfect into what you guys are kind of talking about. So, Matt, I'm going to keep it rolling with you. How can an incident response partner work with cyber insurance carriers from a proactive standpoint and help their clients mitigate risk of cyber attacks?
Yeah, so I think working with different firms like with Linda and Peter, we can find out what are the things that insurance needs to have in place, right? And then with our clients, go through and make sure that they have those things in place, right? Doing those readiness assessments, making sure that they can, restore from backups in the event of a ransomware, making sure those backups are immutable, not, that they aren't affected. And that's just ransomware, right? And then you've got business email compromises. Well, what are you doing to protect for business email compromises, right? You need to proactively put technologies in there, MFA, inbound inbox filtering, et cetera, and going through and really basically just going out and setting up your network so that it is resilient to attacks. And then when attacks, not if, but when attacks occur, you can respond effectively and quickly. And we can do that. Different firms have different things, but tabletop exercises are a good way of going through and kind of getting that muscle memory, ready for when the attack happens. Going through and doing health checks on the environment. What kind of vulnerability, management program do you have? Are you staying up to date? Do you have any systems in your network that are out of service, right? They're not, Microsoft's no longer supporting them, so you're not getting patches. You need to get rid of those operating systems because they're, a gold mine for attackers and stuff like that. So, but I know Jason probably has some insights here as well.
Yeah, I don't want to beat up the MFA thing, but it's top of mind and it's highest priority, I think, in incident response. And when you look at mitigating the risk of cyber attacks, you have to minimize your surface area, right? Your exposure area. And what we see in the industry today is a definite gaping hole in protecting internal accounts, right? Those internal domain admins, right? We've seen modern MFA controls created over the past decade that address more modern authentication methods and things like cloud-based email and even VPNs and things like that. But what about the old stuff, right? What about the old legacy applications and the users who have domain admins and elevated privileges inside their network, right? Those are the targets, right? Service accounts is another big deal. These are all things that we have, I think, as a security industry, we look towards the new modern controls and approaches to defending attacks, and we tend to forget about those things that have been plaguing us for years, right? Which again, domain admins, highly privileged users, service accounts. It seems like the industry has given up on providing protection for those things. But the reality is when there's a ransomware hit, when it hits an organization, it used to be, hey, let's attack an organization and attack every single user, right? Send out this big wide spam email and hope we get, I don't know, 10% of the organization to click the link and infect themselves with ransomware. Now, all you have to do is get one, right? You get one person to click that email and there's automated propagation that infects the entire organization and can even move laterally outside of the organization into the internet, which we saw in 2017 with WannaCry. So it's that change in the game where we need to really focus on where are the holes in the organizations, right? Internal networks or internal people, service accounts, things like that, and how these things are spreading, right? 'Cause I think on the insurance side, you would agree that it's typically not one ransomware infection you're cleaning up from, it's many. And it's because of that automated propagation that happens so quickly. It's hard to control.
I think it's
Yeah,
really
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Linda.
No, I was going to say it's really important to take a look at who has admin rights, who can have access that are escalated, and who can create additional admin sort of roles, and making sure that that's on lock and that that's being monitored and checked in on, and that once you don't need that account, get rid of it. If someone doesn't need that admin access, don't give it to them, because quite often it'll be, someone had admin privileges even though they're maybe the front desk person, and there's no reason for them to have that admin access. So all it took was them being breached, and suddenly it's easy to perpetuate the ransomware and spread it because it's not a segmented network, it's open. And when that happens, when you have a flat pancake network, it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, and
Even
I'll add,
Go ahead, Peter, sorry.
fortune favors the prepared, right? I mean, I'm kind of Boy Scout about the whole thing, but I've had insurance go out of business because of ransomware. They closed the door. 200 people lost their job. It happened. And part of the reason the ransomware got so bad is they didn't have a plan. They went down and they were absolutely hobbled by this, and they didn't even have a phone tree. They didn't know who to call. They were using an outside vendor for some of their infrastructure, and just the delay made the ransom payment go from 500,000 to $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million, and then all of a sudden it was just close it down. We're done. So just even having the preparation in place for when the bad thing happens is incredibly powerful.
Knowing who to call and when can save time, which will save money.
Absolutely, absolutely. So cool. I'll go with the next question here, and this is open to anyone who wants to start here first. How do cyber insurance carriers, as well as CISOs from other companies, stay up to date with the latest cyber threats and vulnerabilities? And then what role do those cybersecurity experts then play in that process?
I guess I'll take the kind of the CISO preparedness component of that question. So as we mentioned earlier, cybersecurity threat landscape is ever evolving. And the prior discussion, I love the music that I heard from everyone, which is, are we doing things the right way for today's environment, right? Because the same things that got us here, attackers are evolving their techniques. So are they sufficient for the future? And I feel this is where the CISO, information and cybersecurity organizations really have to stay up to date on what the attack vectors are, how the attackers are performing their activities. Last year, the last 12, 24 months, 7 of the 8 biggest breaches that we saw came right through the front door, sometimes with multi-factor authentication included. So understanding the techniques the attackers are using, basing those scenarios, bringing them back in. Can you test for them? Do you understand? I love that conversation around attack surface management becomes extremely important, because where are these attackers coming from? If you don't have a good handle, good coverage on what your attack surface looks like internally and externally, then that may be an area that an attacker can exploit, in addition to testing for vulnerabilities, testing your environment from an attacker's viewpoint, and even creating scenarios to stress yourself based on what you're seeing. This is where information sharing comes into play, because I feel that we can't do this alone, and we have to share information, and we have to listen to others, and we got to share the information that we see with others so we can better protect our industries, our environments, and in addition to making sure there's good education and awareness, not just for the cyber team, but for the regular folks that are getting the phishing emails now, with things increasing, that are getting the phone calls, and soon enough are going to be able to get a video call like the one we're having right now, where it's not Linda or Matt, but it's a fake version of Linda and Matt that are talking to us. So we have to continuously change our education for our people, not only with new tools and techniques, but what are the attackers are doing, and making sure that they understand what the process is. That's part of the education and awareness. Having conversations like we're having right now to make sure we share this information, we get questions, and we stress ourselves on how to get better. And finally, contributing to the industry. I think it's so important to provide lessons learned, whether it's in a private environment or in a small cadre environment. I think it's important to share information to make us more resilient, to make us better together, because frankly, that's what the attackers are doing. And I find that a lot of organizations that have overcome a breach, an attack, ransomware, etc., it's how they responded, who they share the information with, and who helped them get through it. I don't know of any single organization that was able to overcome an event by themselves. So it takes a village in this case, and I'm really excited about what I'm seeing for folks sharing information. As a matter of fact, I want to give a quick shout out to the FBI and the DHS for the work they did not too long ago, helping Jamil and Equifax with an attack that they saw well ahead of time. that basically, as per Jamil's post, he had 124 hours to deal with it before the attacks came in, based on intelligence that he got from our government agency. So I like what I'm seeing, but it's going to take some more, because again, the attackers and their ability to collaborate is getting better and better. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, I just want to respond really quick to something that you said that is interesting about going through the front door, even with MFA. We use an image internally that shows it's zoomed in on a gate, right? And that gate represents MFA for email, it represents MFA for VPN, so on and so forth. And then when you pan out of the picture and you see more of the image, you see that there's no fence. So it's just a gate in the middle of an open field. And out, what you see going around the gate is things like PowerShell, PSExec, file-based applications, or command line interfaces, things like that, which is the way that these threats of ransomware are spreading, right? So it's no longer, the threat is still there of getting the front door to be opened, but once the front door is open, how much protection do you have beyond that, right? Can you stop lateral movement through file shares? Can you stop lateral movement through RDP and other, power or scripts? So there's a lot more to just, getting someone to open up the front door and let you in the house. Makes sense.
Gotta have the layers, right, Jason?
Right. Yeah, and I think we all know that, right? We've been beating this up for 30 years of the layered approach.
Yeah, I mean, I really like what Yonzi was saying about the FBI. I have signed up for receiving their emails, so I keep an eye out on what the government is seeing. I keep an eye out on Bleeping Computer, which I find to be a really good resource. And then I like to pick up the phone and talk with the forensic firms that I work with, right? I might pick it up and say, hey, Matt, what are you guys seeing this month? What's been common, what's coming through? Or I'll talk to other carriers that I work with or see or have a relationship with and say, hey guys, we've had a real big jump in Royal ransomware. What are you seeing on your end? And I find that communication within our cyber world, as I think of it, is really important because it keeps our eyes open. And sometimes when I'm on a call with someone who might be experiencing something odd, but it's not quite an event yet, I might be able to say, hey, that sounds a little strange. Do you have O365 or a Microsoft Exchange server on-prem? Have you patched that in the last 2 years? Where are we here? Because sometimes it might be, hey, the threat actors are doing something kind of like this. And if I hear someone telling me about that on a call when I'm dealing with their claim, I might be able to help them a little sooner rather than later, thanks to the intel from those who are seeing it already, right? So I think that collaboration, as you said, so key, so important.
Yeah, I'll add from the insurer side. It used to be you bought an insurance policy and, it was like senior dentist, right? It was like, I paid the bill, I'll see you next year, yada, 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 and forget about it. We don't really have the luxury of being an abstraction or just kind of a paper product that sits on your shelf all year in the cyber insurance space. So this is the little InsurTech commercial, and I'll rush through it as fast as I can. It's annoying, but we have to be more proactive. And so we have our own CISO and we have a team of security analysts. And as vulnerabilities arrive, we on a live basis tell our policyholders about those things. And we alert them, and whatever we can find from an external scan that alerts us to an issue, we hop on it right away. So there's this active feedback loop right now with our policyholders where we're trying to make them a better risk, and that lowers our loss ratio, which means hopefully premiums come down and we have more money at the end of the day to then put more money into security, which that's the idea, that's the virtuous cycle that we're trying to be engaged in right now. But we have to make the investment as an insurance company in that security team. And, a good security team right now is not inexpensive by any measure. But we do see it bear out in the numbers, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do is just be a more proactive player in the risk management portfolio instead of, again, just the paper policy on a shelf somewhere.
That makes perfect sense. All right, we're about to come up here on the 15-minute mark. There's one panelist question that I'd love to ask, and then we do have 3 great questions in the question board. So with the last panelist question, and this is open to anybody, what advice would you give to businesses looking to purchase cyber insurance policies in the current market?
I was a former broker, so I'll chime in real quick. But when you get that application, hand it to your IT director or your CISO. Don't let your CFO try to fill it out. And secondly, have an active conversation about risk management with your broker. Don't just send stuff back to your broker and say, just give me all the quotes you can. Say, hey, what are you seeing? What can make us a better risk? Does the carrier offer any sort of analysis? Can we be in conversation with them right now? We have a lot of ideas. We see a lot of claims. We see a lot of ransomware, and we see a lot of reasons why it happens. So we have some very good feedback for small and medium-sized organizations. You know, larger organizations invest a little bit more, but we have feedback for them too on stuff that we see. I don't know, Linda, if you have any other thought on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think it's really important that you take advantage of proactive services. So sometimes one thing you might want to consider when you're looking for a policy is, you know, is there a law firm you really like or a forensic firm? Are they on a panel that's already pre-approved? If you're familiar with that, maybe you had an event in the past, you want to work with that vendor again, should the worst happen, right? Because they did great. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is just making sure that when you're looking, you're saying, okay, we already do these things. Maybe some of the carriers are looking for X, Y, and Z to be added. Or what are their additional offerings? Do they give you free 1 hour of consultation for that incident response plan creation? You know, maybe there are things you don't have in place yet that your potential carrier could help you put in place. So I think that that can also work well. You get something in place and they can help you hone it or improve it. So know that there's more than just the policy. There's also generally proactive offerings, you know, a book scan to sort of take a look at your business and see if they're seeing anything pinging their attention that they might bring to your attention to say, hey, here's some issues that we're seeing, maybe handle these and come back. And then the bottom line is there's always those top 10, right? Matt touched on a lot of them earlier, and so did Jason, that MFA in place. If you're not sure what these things are, what they mean, talk with your broker. They're able to help you because they've helped others. And working with someone like a Tevora or, you know, some other company that maybe you don't know of, you might be able to add these things in place and become a better risk. And not only does that protect you and hopefully keep you from needing to use your policy, but if you need to use your policy, you know, it's likely going to be less of a payout, right? Because if you have that MFA or you have those better backups, you might be likely to use less of your policy. So if you only have $1 million policy, maybe you use 500K instead of the full $1 million. So I think that those are all really good things.
That's awesome. So we'll go to the question section, unless anyone wanted to chime in.
Yeah, no, I think I want to take it from the viewpoint of a practitioner and a CISO in this space. And frankly, this has been a great discussion, so I appreciate sharing with the panel here. But for me, at a high level, three basic things as you prepare in your journey is number one is cyber hygiene. Extremely important to do the basics really, really well. And by doing the basics well, as Linda just mentioned, it's really good to adhere to or follow a framework. The NIST cybersecurity framework is a great framework to follow, and then measure yourself. Where are you on your journey for cybersecurity in your organization? Number two, stay sharp and keep your people sharp, meaning make sure you're out there, you're understanding the new techniques, you're sharing information, you're hearing from industries, experts and others, and new techniques and tools that are being used to protect you, and share that information. So stay sharp, keep your people sharp. And then finally, cyber insurance is seen as a last line of defense. That being said, it is extremely important and essential because it's not a replacement for your robust security practices that you may be following if you have adherence to the NIST cybersecurity framework, but you need to make sure that your organization is investing adequately in cybersecurity to help prevent, mitigate cyber threats in your environment. in addition to the insurance. So make sure that you're following those 3 precepts, and I feel like that will get you on the right path of continuous improvement in this space.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Yancey. So first question, what we'll do is we'll go down the list of when they came. First question here is, how do you figure out how much coverage a company needs?
That's a good Peter question.
I knew you would send that one to me. Well, so a lot of it, you can benchmark that to a certain extent, right? So your broker can provide you with some data on what organizations your size are purchasing for limits right now. But my advice to you is take a look at your profit after expenses and everything, but you know, your net income, right? And see how vulnerable you are. Now, you can't cover probably 100% of it if you're a pretty large business, but you can also pull data on what an average ransomware demand is looking like for an organization such as yours. The other thing to take into account is inflation. So if you've been buying $1 million this entire time, because of inflation over the last 18 months, you really only have a $900,000 policy. So it's probably worth it to consider buying a little bit more. You know, so go from 1 to 2 or something like that. Large organizations like to stack. They like to buy a lot of limit, right? Somewhere, you know, some organizations buy upwards of $50 or $100 million in limit. And we have seen losses that big, but they tend to correlate with gigantic organizations like Marriott or something like that. So you work with your broker. They can provide you a lot of market data on it right now. But, you know, I'll say this, if I'm a medium-sized business, which I'm defining to be anywhere from, say, 100 million to 500 million in revenue, the floor is a $5 million limit for me. Under 100 million in revenue, there's a lot of variability, and you've got to see what your needs are right now. But hope that helps somewhat.
I would definitely say what Peter says there. Yeah, for sure. Because I deal with a lot of super small, like single doctor office or restaurant or super tiny insureds, and we can blow through $1 million. So I would say that yes, if you're much smaller, you know, even that $1 million mark is that's a good starting point. But as Peter's saying, the bigger you are, the more you will likely need.
Yeah, you're not just paying the ransom. You're paying forensics experts. You're paying to restore all that data. And then guess what? The attorney general might show up. You might have third-party issues regarding privacy law, depending on what data got exposed. And by the way, those don't resolve in a few months. Those take 3 to 5 years to work themselves out. And Linda can probably tell you, third-party claims are blowing up right now on us too. So
definitely increasing for sure. We're seeing a lot more class action lawsuits, right? So say there's a data breach incident and it's in California, there's some attorney calling those people and saying, hey, you have potential to recover money if we do a class action. So then you're having to deal with a class action. So it isn't over when the ransomware is handled, people are back to operational. It's more long-term, and there's a lot of other aspects that a policy has in place to assist with. And some of that is those, you know, third-party claims that are coming forward more commonly.
I call them legal hackers.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next question here. So some of the telecom giants, the AT&Ts, the Comcast, and Lumens, are now offering what appears to be very comprehensive and affordable MSSP packages. What effect do you see that having?
Do you mean like from an underwriting perspective? Do you think that the question was being asked?
I could say so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I see a reduction in losses and I can correlate that to everybody being an AT&T customer, if somebody comes to me and says I'm an AT&T customer, that might, you know, change my opinion of them. But to date, I haven't seen a correlation like that with any one particular security vendor. But I can tell you, if I look at an application, I can see whether an insured has what I call security culture and they care. My fear is people are going to say, oh, I'm getting MSSP from AT&T. I don't need to do anything anymore. So I don't know. That hard question to answer. I don't know if anybody else has a thought on that.
Okay, well, I'll go to the last one then. I think we're just in the 5-minute mark. What percentage of attacks are the result of file-borne threats, such as a corrupted PDF, and are there statistics on that?
So that's interesting. How I can answer that is, so we've seen over the past, I don't know, 10 years, the advent of EDR solutions get really robust and advanced at doing a really good job at stopping file-based attacks, right? So fileless types of attacks are those that don't actually write anything to disk, which are traditionally more harder to address. So I've seen statistics anywhere from 50%, right? 50% of those attacks are file-based, 50% of those attacks or more are fileless-based attacks. Now, the commonality of every single fileless-based attack is using some sort of script. It's using credentials, right? So we've all tried to install an application on our work computers and like, I can't install it. I don't have the proper rights to do so. Well, the same holds true with these fileless-based attacks. Some of these require elevated permissions. And if the adversary or the script or whatever's being run doesn't have those permissions, or they can't use them across the network, well, the threat's basically dead. So that's how I would really address it. I don't know if it's so much based on statistics, right? Which is greater. They're both equal threats. I will say that there's less protection against the fileless-based attacks based on what we've seen, the adversary targeting human beings, right? The credentials.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with Jason. I don't know what the statistics are, but I can say in the last 5 years, maybe more, that fileless attacks are definitely the one that's trending versus the file-based attacks, and simply because technology has gotten better, right? Stuff hiding in memory and then jumping to different processes that are running. Once they get those credentials, whether it's through a phishing email or credential dump on the dark web or something like that, and they get in and then they can run their scripts, assuming they get those privileges, and they get those privileges by elevating, right? They run something else that allows them to get those clear text credentials like Mimikatz or something that allows them to escalate and elevate. We had a really nasty one a couple of years ago that was, I think it was an accountant somewhere in Southeast Asia, and from there, and it was a phishing email, from there they were able to escalate up to domain admin, and like Jason was saying, deploy ransomware across 18 different domain controllers around the world, and it was all through group policy, right? So, but yeah, it's definitely fileless is what I've seen more in the last, I'd say, better part of a decade. So.
Yeah, you're correct. Go ahead, Linda. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, you've been doing great. I'd say that each threat actor is different, right? Their level, their skill is going to be different. So you have the really advanced ones that they know what they're doing and they do it really, really, really well, and you wish that they were on our side, right? And then you have the ones that are kind of just messing around, figuring out what they're doing, and sometimes they can cause a lot more of a mess in a network from what I've seen, right? So I've seen lesser advanced ransomware where it led to more file corruption because it's not as clean of a decryptor key. So I have seen that for files, right? And that is also another reminder to not store really large files. But anyway, your threat actor and their level, and when they target you, that is kind of like a toss of the die. We don't know how skilled they're going to be, how skilled they're not going to be, but it can really affect the outcome based on which ones are successful.
Yeah. So before I wrap up here, would anyone like to add any closing statements? If not, I can go ahead and wrap up because we are on the 2-minute mark.
I just want to thank everyone. I think you guys have been great. I feel like we've learned a lot, and I love that we had so many different perspectives on this call.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Thank you, Tevora, for hosting. Thank you, all the panelists and all the attendees out there. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I second that. Thank you so much, guys, and thanks for participating. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And like I said before, thanks for everyone who's going to spend the hour to watch this webinar here in a couple of days. So thank you, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And then Linda and Peter, I'll see you in 2 weeks in Philly at Net Diligence.
I'll see you there.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.